Welcome to Lesson 1-8, Multiplying and Dividing Integers. Today's objectives: I will be able to multiply integers, divide integers, and solve problems involving multiplying integers and involving dividing integers. Alright, so the first thing I want you to look at is each of these situations have a different consequence. So a good guy is a positive, a bad guy is a negative. Coming to town is a positive, and leaving town is a negative. So if a good guy comes to town, so a positive and a positive, that's going to give you a positive. If a bad guy comes to town, so a negative and a positive, that's always going to give you a negative. If a good guy leaves town, so that's a positive and a negative, that's going to be a negative. And then if a good or a bad guy leaves town, then that is going to be a positive. So a bad guy leaving town would be a positive. Alright, so notes for integer multiplication. So you have to remember that multiplication is repeated addition. So if I have 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, I change that to 5 times 2, and I know that that gives me 10. So it's the same thing with negatives. If I do negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2, then that's going to be 5, because I have 5 negative 2's, times negative 2. And remember, a negative plus negative plus negative plus negative plus negative is going to give you a negative. So that 5, that positive 5, times the negative 2 is going to give you a negative 10. Right, so when we look at this, if we do 5 times 4, so a positive times a positive, our answer has to be positive. So our answer is still going to be 20. If I do 5 times negative 4, my answer is still going to be 20, but in this case, because it's a positive and a negative, my answer is going to be negative 20. If I do negative 5 times a positive 4, my answer is still going to be 20, but again, because I have a negative and a positive, my answer is going to be a negative 20. And then if I have a negative 5 times a negative 4, my answer is still 20, so it doesn't change the way multiplication works, but because it's a negative and a negative, it gives you a positive. Now this is different from addition, because with addition, a negative plus a negative gives you a negative, but in multiplication, a negative times a negative gives you a positive. And then we always have a set rule for negative and positive. So anytime the signs are different, your answer is going to be negative. Anytime the signs are the same, the answer is going to be positive. So we're going to practice this. So if I have a positive times a positive, I know that my answer has to be what? If you said positive, you are correct. If I have a positive times a negative, because my signs are different, I know that my answer has to be negative. And if I have a negative times a negative, I know that my answers have to be positive. When working with integer division, so think of negative 8 split into 4 parts. So if I take negative 8 and I split it into 4 parts, each part would have to be worth negative 2. So since division is the opposite of multiplication, it's going to give us the same results as multiplication does. So if I have 4 times a negative 2, then I know that because it's a positive and a negative, that my answer has to be negative. So with the multiplication, I have positive and negative, and my answer is negative. So it's the same thing as with division. So if I have a negative 8 divided by a positive 4, it's still going to give me that negative 2. Okay, so see how we just changed the numbers around and changed the symbols? They're all still the same, so the rules are the same for multiplication and for division. So I want you to try these and see if you can figure out what the answers for each of these would be, and when you come back, we'll go over your answers. All right, so a positive divided by a positive will give you a positive. A positive divided by a negative, or vice versa, will give you a negative. And a negative divided by a negative will give you a positive. So this is where it's really important to be practicing your rules, because they are different between multiplication and addition, but they're the same for multiplication and division. So it gets to be really tricky. All right, so to multiply and divide integers, the first thing you want to do is figure out what's the sign going to be and write it down. Just like we did with addition and subtraction, figure out the sign, then do the work. Step 2 would be multiply or divide like normal. And then step 3, write your answer with your sign. Remember, if it's negative, you do put a negative sign. If it's positive, we don't put a sign. We just put the number. All right, so I'm going to try these first 2 problems with you, and then you are going to do the last 4, or these 2, on your own, and then these 2 are going to be part of your quiz. So if I do -9 times -7, I know a negative times a negative gives me a positive, so my answer is going to be positive. So I write that down just to remind me. I know that 9 times 7 gives me 63, and since my answer is positive, I know that my answer is a positive 63. Now with this problem, I have 3 steps. Since I have 3 steps, just like we did the other day, we have to do them one piece at a time. So first I just look at the first part of the problem, -2 times -5. Since I have -2 times -5, the negative and the negative is going to give me a positive, but that's only for the first part. So -2 times -5 will give me a positive 10, but I still have to multiply that by -9. Now I have a negative times a positive. Since my signs are different, it's going to give me a negative answer, so I'll put my negative sign down right away. I know that 10 times 9 is 90, so my answer is a -90. I want you to try -64 times 10 and 81 divided by -9, and when you come back, we'll go over your answers. All right, so in this case, I have a negative and a positive, so my answer is going to be negative, so I can actually just put my negative sign down here right away. I know that when I do anything times a number that ends in a 0, I ignore the 0 for now, and I just do 64 times 1. 64 times 1 is 64. Since I have this 1 0, I add 1 0 to my answer. So 64 times 10 is 640. But because I know my answer was supposed to be negative, my answer is negative 640. Now here I have a positive and a negative again, and even though it's division, the rules still apply. So my answer will be negative. I know that 81 divided by 9 gives me 9, so my answer is a -9. So what I would like you to do, I would like you to try this problem and this problem on your own, and they will be part of your lesson quiz. But we're not done just yet. The other part of your lesson quiz is going to be this real-world connection. So each month, Michael has $5 deducted from his checking account for a charitable contribution. How much gets deducted in 1 year? So remember, deducted is a negative. So the other thing I want you to do, I want you to set up your expression. And then I want you to find your answer. Both of these will also be a part of your lesson quiz. So make sure to do your best, take your time, and then take the lesson quiz after you have completed these problems in your workbook. As always, if you have any questions, please be sure to post them to Edmodo so we can go over them in class tomorrow.